everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have an awesome guest who is a leader in digital marketing and client engagement. Phil. Phil is president and chief client officer at MaxConnect Digital. With nearly 5 years in his current role, Phil has a wealth of experience in driving tangible business results and enhancing client experiences through data-driven strategies. Phil, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. Tell us all about you, your company, the work you do. Thank you.
Great to be with you, Tisha. I'm excited to talk through decision making. And it's interesting. I think I probably sit in the middle of, I'm not a person that overanalyzes. I'm known as somebody who likes to make decisions. But when a team member comes to me and says, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z, or, we want to go to such and such conference, or we want to invest in such and such sponsorship, I'm usually one to pause to say, let's take a second and talk through that. Let's make sure that we have all of the right information on the table and that we're able to move forward as an organization quickly and efficiently, but also in a way that we're maximizing for the right outcome. And so I'm excited to kind of talk through how I've done that in business and life, how I've seen great examples of that, et cetera.
Well, I'm excited to talk about that with you because, as you know, decisions are the thing here. So I'm grateful that you've got some good stuff for us. Let's jump right on in. Let's kind of talk a little bit more extensively topic related, specifically about your industry. So you've got this background in digital marketing and client relations. What do you believe is the most critical element for brands to succeed in enhancing their market presence today?
I mean, it's interesting. I would say that from our perspective, it's consistency. It's being able to understand the landscape of the people you're trying to attract, how they consume the internet. And I think we make assumptions, and sometimes those are right, where we think, well, everyone must be on TikTok. Everyone must be on Meta. If I'm going to reach my audience, I need to, live cast from Instagram. No, none of those channels. You'll never reach me there or sell me a product. And so understanding the behaviors and differences and also the motivators, what would cause someone to buy a product, good, or service, and what's motivated to them or what's motivating them to kind of move forward. And so I think for us, it's a very analytical, data-driven approach where we make decisions early on with our clients regarding who their target personas and customer profiles are, who would be kind of that, bullseye type view, and then understand how they consume the internet. And then from there, we can make decisions regarding channel allocation, spend, consistency. One decision that I think is interesting right now, we can know all of that other information, but then, the tariffs hit with China and with every country in the world. And suddenly we have clients in paralysis. We have clients saying, I don't know what to do now, because this maybe changes everything. And where we've tried to get to that decision point in Matrix, which is to say, if you do nothing, and we've learned this from COVID, what's going to happen is you will lose market share. You'll become less relevant. You're going to stop building your pipeline and funnel of, prospective customers, and you will be weaker at the end of the day. You may have saved $20 to $100 to $500,000, but you'll miss out on millions of revenue. But the right answer also isn't, spend like there's no tariffs. You need to pivot in messaging. You need to refocus your energy and effort and say, what is happening in my competitive space and category? And how can I move forward boldly with confidence, grow in market share, but at the same time, not put my company in a position that's unrecoverable?
Yeah, I think this is really good. A couple of things just so that the audience picks up on them. So this concept of options and weighing them out effectively. So what happens if I do nothing? So you laid out in this particular use case, what would happen if I do nothing? But in any decision case, there should be a question of what would happen if I did nothing. And sometimes that's going to lead to I need to do something and sometimes not. And then the other is, how important understanding the external factors are. So in this case, the tariffs are an external factor. So how do you know what that is and how that's going to impact my business are just really good things for the audience to be thinking about, to contextualize everything you just said. Let's stay here for just a moment around the importance of tailoring strategies, right, for a specific audience, because that's kind of where we started there. Can you talk a little bit about insights you have on how you understand your client objectives and how that impacts the effectiveness of campaigns, ultimately driving revenue growth for an organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. At MaxConnect, we build a client team that can consist of anywhere from 3 to 15 team members based on the extensive scope and nature of the account. And it's interesting, what we continually hear is, what would help our client team focus on driving outcomes for this client? Number one is always, what is the business goal and objective? If we can understand where the goalpost is and where we need to move down the field, our team can then say, here's how we might assemble from a strategy, creative, messaging, content, website, and digital media perspective. And so we can rally around that when we understand what's being measured and what matters most to the business. And that might be a handful of factors. That then motivates, clarifies, and I think unites any sort of client team on behalf of that client. And so we're very good at not only asking those questions up front, but then we have to revisit those weekly, monthly, quarterly to say, this is what you said, this is what matters most. And if we're able to effectively work towards that objective, then you know, we're able to grow and increase the opportunity to work alongside you, grow the budgets, provide, greater value. And so I think for us is getting a lot of clarity on what is the business outcome.
Yeah, you speak in my language, right? So we hope to build a world where there are outcome focused visionaries. So you're just like whispering sweet nothings over here when you start talking about outcomes. I hope no one is offended by that. So let's keep going. One of the things that you just mentioned though that I want to revisit a little bit. How do you go about setting the goalposts, right? So you talked a little bit about you got to have the outcome. Help our audience think a little bit about how to draft up that outcome, because on one hand you have people setting annualized goals at the top of a year. How do you think about the desire to see something be different after you do a thing a little bit differently than just setting your annual goals?
Yeah. So there is a methodology that Google, Intel subscribe to, and it's called OKRs, objectives and key results, right? And so I'll give you a real life example that I just got off the phone with today. We have a client that's a large brand, hundreds of millions of dollars, that feels that even though they do a lot in terms of revenue and they have a great distribution, they're hardly well known, particularly in their home state. And they said to us, our objective would be, so the big goal, the mountain we want to summit someday, is that we're known as a integrated community driven brand that has high brand recognition and high consumption of our products in the categories we play within. And for us, we say that's a fantastic goal. Guess what? That's multiple years. That isn't something we're going to solve overnight. And so our next step is to say, where is the brand awareness and engagement today? And how do we understand that? So we're going to conduct market research, baseline survey, 1,000 individuals that, you know, understanding what the unaided brand awareness is in the categories they play in, that they understand what this company does, what products they sell, et cetera. Once we've set that baseline, we can then start to look at some key results. So let's say, for instance, this client who has this aspirational goal says, we want to take our brand recognition baseline of 15% and we want to move that over the next 6 months to 30%. Can we do that? So now we have a semi annual goal. We understand what the goalpost is and how to frame the conversation. And so what we then do is devise a strategy between brand and sports sponsorships and activations with influencers and buying billboards with some of those partnerships and creating compelling content that is telling their larger brand story and why it matters. And we deploy that and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars against that over a multiple month period. And then 6 months later, we say, okay, we're going to check on how the daisies are growing and see, have we gone from 15 to 30%? Have we hit our objective? If we've exceeded or fallen behind, and then from there, we'll devise what the next 6 month strategy is. All the while, we're keeping our bigger objective in play. That's the big goal we're working towards. But we have some check ins, some milestones, some key results that we know we're making progress. We're a quarter up that mountain, we're halfway up the mountain, and here's the team we need to assemble.
This is great. And by the way, audience, are the daisies growing? Ask yourself. I really like that. Hey, so what happens though when you're in this situation and you don't have all the information, right? So you've got to make high stakes decisions, usually around spend, time, personnel, and now you don't have all the information. How does that work? Do you have frameworks that you use for that?
Yeah. So I would say you may not have all the information. And I would say any good hedge fund understands information arbitrage. Hardly ever can you have 100% of all information, because if you did, you would always succeed in the stock market. You would win every poker game and you would be a gazillionaire. So in information arbitrage, we say the level of effort to get 100% of information to make the perfect decision requires, and the cost far outweighs the benefit. So if I can get 60% there or 70% there. So the frameworks we provide to our clients is to say, we have a playbook and we have a wealth of industry knowledge and data that is proven time and time again that if you activate across these 4 channels and invest this much budget, these are what the outcomes will be. Now, for your individual situation, it might differ, but the uh, but the principles that have gotten us to this point in this category, informs us where we need to go. The other thing we can do, instead of conducting such extensive primary research, we can look at secondary research. We can look at trends data from Google, from other sources online. So you'll be amazed that you can get to that 60 to 70% of information arbitrage to make the right decision, even though you don't have perfect information, you have enough to take the next step. And that's maybe the key. If you can begin to move forward and take one step forward in confidence, I think it's Jeff Bezos that talks about going through a door and being able to say, oh, this wasn't the door I wanted to go forward, and shutting it and going back to another door. And so when you make decisions, some can't be undone, but most can.
Yeah, it's one way and two-way doors. Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so most of the time when we're talking marketing, it's two-way doors. And so if it's a one-way door, you want a little bit more information. But if it's a two-way door, then you say, well, we can step through that door. And if we don't like that door after 3 months, we can back right out and go down a different door. And so in our world, budgets are fluid, they're adaptable, they're changing, and hardly ever do you get it right the first time. In fact, if we're 90% accurate the first month or two in terms of our targeting, allocation, investment on behalf of a client, I'm shocked. That would be something to celebrate. Usually you're getting 70% there. And then the next month and the next month. And over the course of time, you might be borderline mid 90% accurate in terms of perfect decision making. And that's good enough.
Listen, this is great. Well, taking one step forward, like just forward, constant motion. We all tell people it's not about doing everything all at once. It is always about taking one step forward. And then, in the words of Dr. Shamika Moment, who works in my company, she says it's all figure outable. So I'm adding that in here because I think that it's relevant to this idea that it's not, if you can take two-way doors, take two-way doors, because we can figure it all out.
So just another quick example. One
Yeah.
of the decisions we made was to get into sports marketing, to be a player where we're working with NFL, NBA, and NCAA college teams across the country. And what's interesting, what I thought was going to be the right approach in terms of the go-to-market strategy, who our potential clients are, it's been interesting. We've been on this journey, and what we didn't do is have perfect information. So we made a decision to hire a key individual. We made a decision to sponsor some key events. We're into it a decent amount of money. But these, again, are two-way doors. And what's interesting is we've gotten into the space, found number one, it's taken us far longer to make the progress and success we hope to have made at this point. We're not totally satisfied with our investment of time, so to speak. But here's what is interesting. it's far that there's greater opportunity. And what we can offer the sports marketing world has iterated probably 5 or 6 different times. And so what I'm excited about is that we're now talking about opening up an office in the Middle East, in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And those weren't even conversations we were having a year ago. And so what I've usually found is if you'll make that leap of faith and step forward with enough information, you're always amazed on what that next step will, where it will take you and where it will lead you. And you'll have doors that you didn't even know exist begin to open. And so for us, taking that next step with a level of confidence and a little bit of faith, that usually leads to a much more beautiful ending. But to get there, you can't be second guessing those decisions. It's moving forward.
Let's say you move forward boldly. What happens when you start tracking some of the outcomes? How do you track outcomes of some of your major decisions and initiatives? Are there any particular metrics that you find super bold in measuring success?
Running a business, number one will always be, what does our revenue look like? Period. So we made a decision about a year and a half ago to open another office. We're based in Salt Lake City, Utah, is our headquarters. We have team members throughout the country, but we thought, what if we started to build physical offices and a presence in other markets? How would that help amplify our growth and be a stronger regional player there? And so we took a leap of faith. We opened a Phoenix office. We hired a team. We moved some people down. So much work. And that was a somewhat of a one-way door for a time period, signing a multi-year lease that we said, okay, we're committed. And ultimately for us, it's revenue under management. What is that office producing? And we didn't know where it would all come from. Certainly, we hoped things would work out and there was some early wins. But what's interesting, how I'm looking at that situation today is I'm saying, what are we managing in terms of revenue? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars, for instance, per month or millions of dollars per year can that office produce? And what's exciting is it started, it's happening. The team is producing, the team is engaged. They feel more ownership about that decision because we've enabled them, we've equipped them. And so that's maybe another part of the conversation. We made a decision as an agency on an executive level to open a new office. That team that's running that office, they're now making decisions with full autonomy and they can accept that they reap the benefits and the consequences. Their salaries or compensation rise and fall based on their level of effort. And so they're now making decisions in their own, way autonomously, independent from us. And what's exciting is because we're aligned with those same outcomes and KPIs, as they grow revenue, as they see that opportunity, they're making better and better decisions. And we don't have to be involved in those day-to-day tasks.
So you're not in the day-to-day ones because you've helped to increase the capacity of the team, but tell me more about how you keep the team continuously developing and adapting to meet changing market needs. So especially because we know that the digital landscape is like moving at a crazy warp speed.
Yeah, I will say so. I mean, we all know to push decision making down to the lowest level that you can, but that should be informed decision making. And so, quite frequently, sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's monthly. We do try to provide, for instance, with the tariffs, questions have continued to come back to us. Hey, what do we do in the situation that the client says X, Y, and Z? What do we do when we're being asked about if TikTok's banned? Can we use TikTok for clients? What's our point of view as an agency? What do we do as it relates to higher interest rates? How do we help our clients in home building navigate that? So these are questions that will bubble up on behalf of the various team members that we have. And then we don't try to make universal decisions for them, but we do try to inform them to say, here's some guiding principles. And if you can give them the principles and the information and you've hired smart team members, they'll figure it out rather than find every scenario of decision that needs to be made and have a complex decision tree. We simply say, here's the principles upon which you should operate. These are our core values. You understand what matters most to us as an agency. And here's the information we can share relevant to the timeliness and what's happening. Go make a decision. We have 100% confidence and trust in you.
So on that note, let's dig a little bit more into collaboration. So we know that it's key in any organization. What are some of the ways that you make sure that there's effective collaboration between teams and departments at Max Connect?
Mutually assured destruction, right? I'm joking. I would say that as an agency, that is hard because there is times that one team is not on the same page as another team. And there's friction, and some of that friction is good. But what we always want to make sure we're doing is number one, we set kind of here's the outlook for the year. Here's where we're focused as an agency. So, for instance, this year as an agency, our theme is to think wide and act smart. We have a couple of initiatives around that. One of those is developing an exceptional client experience. The second is taking advantage of AI in a way that's never been seen before at our agency. And the third is to really develop our human edge. How do we help our team members become just better humans? More collaborative, more communicative, being able to share and create the best ideas together. So, as we've kind of set out that theme and goals and we're executing against those initiatives, we're trying to bring team members together to say, where we see the greatest success with client and collaboration was with them is if we understand shared problems, shared opportunities, as we understand shared objectives. And then the team can rally together to say, look, it's not about being right. It's about making sure the right thing's done on behalf of. And when you have that kind of mindset and that hubris or pride or having to be right drops aside, and when the team's rowing together, you can feel a difference. There is that, that there's the winds behind you blowing your sails, and the client can sense the difference when we're collaborating in a quarterly business review, and we say, here's where we've been able to get the client to. The goalpost though is 20 yards ahead. What can we do to help continue to push forward? We get amazing ideas, and I can be part of those discussions. I might facilitate conversations, but I am blown away when you can be in a room with no egos trying to solve shared problems together and what the team can come up with. And often it's from the people you don't expect.
So, shared vision, shared purpose, these are all things that lead to the environment. So, it sounds like you guys are doing a good job with leadership. But I like this concept of think wide and act smart. I couldn't have said it better myself. Let me ask you a question. There's an idea in brief. It comes out of the Harvard Business Review. And this particular one is all about sustained profitable. So I'm going to read to you the problem and cause that they suggest and also the solution that they suggest, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts on it, okay? So the problem they state is that sustained profitable growth is a nearly universal corporate goal, but it is an elusive one. Empirical research suggests that when inflation is taken into account, most companies barely grow at all. The cause being while external factors play a role, most companies' growth problems are self inflicted. Too many firms approach growth as in a highly reactive, opportunistic manner. And then it goes on to say the solution, though, is to grow profitably over the long term. Companies need a strategy that addresses three key decisions: how fast to grow, the rate of growth, where to seek new sources of demand, direction of growth, and how to amass the resources needed to grow, the method of growth. Let's talk about that a little bit.
That's some powerful insight. I like that. For us as an agency, and this somewhat kind of speaks to that, but I joined in the end of 2019 and I had run another agency for 12 plus years and we were smaller than this agency is. And when I joined and a few months later, COVID happened and our revenues dropped 28% overnight. And I kind of wondered, what is this ownership group going to think? How will they behave? And not that I was worried because we were financially sound, but a lot of agencies were laying off their teams and saying we have to kind of hold together and weather this storm. And what was so interesting is the first week of COVID being kind of announced as a pandemic, the message that came from our ownership team was nobody be worried. We'll weather this together and we're going to start hiring immediately. Tell your friends and your family we're looking for the best people possible. And they immediately said, where are new sources directionally? How can we expand other markets? And we hired some of our very best team members during the COVID era. And we came out roaring the back half of that year, growing at 78% over the course of a couple of months. And it was so interesting that when the reaction was be bold, but measured, and let's make sure that we understand where we're headed. That kind of made all the difference. And so when I think about kind of some of those statements that you've made, and, most are growing only with inflation and it's not impressive. We have a target, and that over the course of 5 to 10 years, we know exactly what we want our revenue growth to be. We know exactly, nationally speaking, how and where our business is distributed and the diversification. And so one thing that was really intentional is that, rewind 10 years ago, like 70% of our revenue was from one vertical, one industry. And when that industry didn't do well, or when it was seasonal dips, we would all suffer. And so one thing that we've done to be very intentional is to say we geographically are looking at regional pockets throughout the country. I mean, we work with clients on a national level, but how Texas performs for us as a market is different than Indianapolis, which is different than Florida, which is different than California. And we're in all of these markets, but being able to diversify our geographical, team members and resources and client base has made a huge difference. Diversifying from one industry to 7 and seeing that there's seasonal lows, but there's seasonal highs that can counteract that from others. And so I think where we've tried to be intentional is to say, let's go find the industries that, one, we can do well with, 2, to complement some of our other kind of off months, so to speak, or can be counter-cyclical. But 3, let's go find the very best team members. I mean, we're a sales organization in the sense of when I talk to most marketing agencies, they have 1 or 2 new business people, and we have 20. We are growing leaps and bounds because when everyone's thinking about revenue and everyone's aligned with that same goal, you tend to grow because they're aligned and their compensation is coming from that, same vision that you have for the company overall.
So it sounds like you kind of agree. You've got rate of growth, direction of growth, method of growth, and you actually outlined what you guys are doing on each one of those. Hey, I thank you for that. Let's explore your decision-making style a little bit. I'm going to give you this persona assessment. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. And on the 4 questions, you're going to tell me how much you relate to them on a scale of 0 to 100%. Now, you only get 100%. Across all 4 questions. So here we go. Here's the very first one. You're considering a new marketing strategy. How do you ensure that it aligns with MaxConnect Digital's core values and enhances the client experience? Where are you on that question? Is that
I'm just writing it down. Let me do this. If I can hear all 4 questions, I can quickly rate
that's not
order these.
I'm sorry, but that's not how this works.
Okay. So on the core values, enhancing the client experience, I'm going to give that 35%.
35%. Keep track of your 100% for me, will you? So that's called a feeler. Okay. So that you are currently 35% feeler persona. All right, let's go to your next one. Your next one says, hey, we're reflecting on last year's marketing initiatives. What specific trends or insights have you uncovered that can significantly influence the next strategies?
I would say on that one, I'm going to give that 15%.
Okay, that's called a planner. So you're 35% feeler, 15% planner at this point. Here's your next one. In evaluating our previous marketing changes, what key lessons have we learned that have fundamentally changed our decision-making process?
So evaluating past strategies and performance, I'm going to put that at 20%.
20% counter. So now you're counting it up. Okay, here's your very last one. As you formulate new marketing strategies, what specific data points are we going to rely on to validate our decisions?
Well, so that puts me at 50. So that would be 30% is what I have remaining. So I would, yeah, I would agree with that.
Would agree with that? Cool. So you are 35% feeler, 15% planner, 20% counter, and 30% data driver. So It kind of makes sense. Everything you said on this call suggested you have pretty balanced decision making, but it also leaned you heavily towards experience and expertise, which usually lends itself to the feeler persona. And then, of course, driving via data, which is about 30%. So, pretty good. That's the exercise. Pass it on to your team.
It's interesting. I will say that a lot of times I'll be in a meeting with a client and talking through strategy, and there'll be a spark or an idea. And my level of confidence in my idea is 100%. I mean, it always is. And I can sell it to the client, whether it's right or wrong. But I would say that that feeler where it feels right, and I've done this for over 20 years, but there's that sixth sense of, you know what, this makes sense. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to get everyone to agree with me or, kind of circle the wagons around at least one idea because, it's an amalgamation of experience and feelings.
Yeah, and what I like though is that this is actually how decisions get made, right? This is the work, and then the how it gets implemented and how you end up at success is getting people to come around and join and circle the wagon, as you would say. Hey, so as we wrap up this conversation, let me ask you one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to an aspiring leader in the digital marketing space, or in client management, what would it be?
It's been interesting over the years. Early in my career, I was focused on being that top performing salesperson, being that top performing relationship person, being the top strategist, and really leading out where I was getting attention or recognition because I could, kind of be agile and move quickly. And what's been interesting, and I've been kind of mentored along the way to see early in my career, I behaved more like an aspiring Olympic athlete. And my focus now is to be an Olympic coach. It's to train the next generation of Olympians.
Yeah.
It's to shift my focus from developing the hard skills to rather, how do I have the soft skills and leadership skills to help the next generation improve? And so for me, where I get my fulfillment isn't in what I'm doing to succeed personally or my individual contribution to the agency. But when I see individual team members recognized, winning awards, growing budgets, succeeding on behalf of the client, that for me is maybe the most exciting. And so one thing that I try to do is when a individual comes to me and my team and says, "Hey, this is my situation. I don't know what to do here." What I'll typically do is just ask questions. And after about a minute or two, that individual will say, "Okay, I think I figured it out myself." And if I can do nothing more than help them make their own decisions that they can own, be accountable for, and feel like they have autonomy, I think that allows them to become leaders in their own right.
Well, that's good stuff, Phil. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for being on the show. Your expertise in driving revenue growth through digital strategies is inspirational. Can you share with our listeners where they can learn more about you and Max Connect?
You can follow me on LinkedIn at Phil Case, or you can come to our website, maxconnect.com.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, rate it, share it with your network. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.